To talk just for a few minutes about correlations in research. One of the book chapters you'll be reading talks a good bit about correlations, and for those of you who have not had a statistics class, this might be a useful few minutes spent discussing these. So a correlation is just a relationship. So we measure the relationship between two different variables, and maybe in this study, we may measure the relationship between the degree of religiosity that someone has and their fear of death. So that would be a relationship between the two variables. Anytime you see a correlation and it's measured with what we call an R value, just think of R meaning relationship. We have three things to look at. We have the direction of the relationship, so it's either a positive or a negative relationship. We call a positive one a direct relationship and a negative one an inverse relationship. We have a form for each relationship, whether it's either linear or curvilinear, and we have the strength of the relationship from -1 to +1. We'll look at all of these separately. But close to a -1 is a very strong negative relationship. Close to a +1.0 is a very strong positive relationship. If you get a number that's 0.1 or 0.05 that's close to 0, that's not very much relationship at all. So first let's look at the positive and negative relationship. So a positive one is one that as one variable goes up, the scores on that variable go up, the scores on the other one go up too. Now this is just a textbook example I took from a textbook. Let's just pretend like we're at a baseball game and we're working in the concession stand. So as the temperature gets higher, you're going to have a higher number of beer sales and probably everything cold to drink for that matter. So it goes, as the temperature goes up, so does the sale of those cold beverages. The negative relationship is shown on the right-hand side, and that is as the temperature gets hotter, the coffee sales go down and probably the hot chocolate sales too. So that's what we call a negative or an inverse relationship. As one variable goes up, the other one goes down. So in our study that we're looking at, if we see a negative relationship between the amount of religiosity or religious beliefs and fear of the unknown, if we have a negative relationship between those two variables, which we will see in a few minutes, then that means as the person gets more religious, or the people who are more religious have less of a fear of the unknown. So that's a negative relationship. Now, a curvilinear or linear, most of the relationships we'll look at will be linear relationships, just like the ones we just looked at. As one goes up, the other one goes up, or as one variable goes up, the other one goes down. Sometimes it's not quite that simple, and let's look at this curvilinear relationship here on the left. Think about babies and reaction time. So when you're a little small child or a toddler or a baby, your reaction time is not very good. So on that y-axis there on the left, we see the reaction time in milliseconds, and of course a high reaction time actually means that you're kind of have slow reaction. So for the really younger children, between 0 and say 7 or 8 years old, their reaction time is a little bit slower. Then as we get older, 10-year-olds, 20-year-olds, it gets faster. And then as we age, our reaction time gets slower again, where, by the time we get to be 60 or 70 or 80 years old, it may be as slow as a toddler again. So that's a curvilinear relationship. The one on the right shows a different type of curvilinear relationship. And this might be a medication that you're taking perhaps for depression. And so as the dose goes up, your mood score goes up, but obviously you're not going to just take more and more and more medication and feel better and better, because at some point that will level off, and taking more medication will make you feel about the same as taking a little bit less. So the 50 and the 60 milligrams, there's not that much difference in how good you're going to feel mood-wise. In fact, if you take too much medication, it might actually make you feel worse. One of the relationships that we'll look at in the chapter you're going to be reading is a curvilinear relationship between religiosity and fear of death. And it talks about men, and this is a U-shaped one, where the men who have no religious belief don't have very much fear of death, because they probably just think they're going to die and nothing else is going to happen. The people who are moderately religious have a greater fear of death, but the people who are very religious, instead of having an even greater fear of death, it goes back down, they have lesser fear of death. You'll be thinking about that during our reading this week. And then finally, we have the strength of relationships. We have strong and weak relationships. So let's look at this first one. If the relationship, even if it's positive, if it is close to 0, which this diagram A is there a relationship between shoe size and IQ? No. They're not related at all. So if you plot your dots on a graph, with each person being one dot, and we plot their shoe size against their IQ, there won't be any relationship between the two. The second one, graph B, is a moderate relationship. It's probably about a positive relationship of about 0.5 perhaps. And it says, as IQ scores go up, does college GPA go up? Well, yes, but it's not a perfect relationship. It's just a moderate one. Because IQ scores and college GPA are related, but there are other things that affect GPA besides just the person's IQ. So those are related in a moderate way. The one that's the perfect 1.0 relationship is this one on the far right, diagram C, and that shows as your annual salary goes up, your monthly salary goes up at the exact same rate. So if you have an annual salary of say a monthly salary of $1,000 as an annual salary of $12,000, and monthly salary of $2,000 as an annual salary of $24,000, and so on. So they go up in a perfectly linear fashion. So that's the degree of relationships. So as you look at the charts today in your reading, or whenever you do your reading, you will see positive or negative in front of each relationship value, and you'll also see a number that tells the strength of that relationship. You'll also see on the graph a little asterisk that tells whether the relationship is significant. And I'm not going to go into a long, detailed explanation of statistical significance, but just the short explanation, or the easy one, is that if you see one asterisk by a number, that's a good thing. That means that for that relationship between those two variables, there's only about a 5% probability or less that this correlation occurred by chance. So that just gives us confidence in that correlation. If it's got the double asterisk, that's even better. That means there's only about a 1% probability or less that this correlation occurred by chance. So that's a correlation that we're going to have a lot of confidence in. So that's all we're going to do on correlations today. Just a really quick explanation so that maybe the article that you read will make a little bit more sense to you, especially if you're not proficient in interpreting statistics. So enjoy your reading.